and thanks for joining me once again with the Scale Model Geek for another build. This time around I'm creating this dude, this Ogre. Now, he's a chappie that I actually printed quite a little while ago, and I finally found some time to actually build him. Now, I did have some minor issues with the fitting of him. Like I said, it was a very early build, so I was still setting up my printer and so forth. I will need to do some sanding so it fits together, and this little arm here kind of snapped while I was testing, but that's an easy fix. So it's time to start putting them together. From here on in, I'm going to call this Ogre Gary. Here I am sanding all the bits and pieces so it fits the bottom half and the top half. Not quite a great fit, so I'm going to have to work out what I'm going to do there. No doubt probably a whole bunch of filing and sanding to get them to fit. And the arm's looking better already. He's quite a muscly fella. Now Gary, as you can see, is quite a large model. Took many hours to print him. And at this point I actually noticed his arm was a bit dodgy, so that's going to take a bit of filling. First I'll file it down to sort of the shape I need, then pull out some of the Tamiya putty, paste it on, try and shape it roughly to where I need it, and while that's drying I'll just put his feet on to his legs, super glue that into place. And super gluing also his other arm, and it's got a bit of a gap in there, so I'm going to do a bit of filling with it a little bit later with some Tamiya putty once again. And this side's going to be a little bit rougher, so it's going to use a bit of putty in there. But what I'm going to do as a starting point is actually fill it up with super glue and pour a bit of this leftover rapid fix that I had from previous super glue kit that I bought. And that works really well because it dries instantly, and it's super hard, super strong. And what better way to put on Tamiya putty than your finger? And Gary's slowly taking shape, and just some liquid cement there, just to thin out the edges so I don't have as much sanding to do. And the trick is to fold as many times as possible, to make it as small as possible, and to make it as awkward as possible to use. Lucky this Tamiya putty is very easy to sand. Quick clean, a super duper quick vacuum. Now, I'm going to have to think about that joint between his top half and bottom half. So it's time to give them a bit of an undercoat. So I'm just going to mix these two, the airbrush thinner and the surface primer. I'm using Ghost Grey, and it's a sort of like a 50-50 a mix. Kind of guessing here. Straight into the airbrush. And I kind of stuffed up the mix there. As you can see, I'm getting a lot of overspray there, and that's because it's too thin. There's too much thinner in there. So I go in and remix it a bit straight after this section here, make it a little bit thicker. Now I'm getting a much even spray, so I'm not wasting it all over the box. I am wearing a mask, so keeping myself safe. And this joint between the two halves is starting to annoy me, so I kind of think okay, I'm just might cut off that joining lug, and I'm just using my hose from a vacuum cleaner. That's rather connected, and that you can see that sucks up the dust really well, even though I am still wearing a mask. And once I get through as much as possible, it just pops off. can see it's such a big difference. I'm really happy with that. Time to glue his bottom half and top half together. I just figured if I glue the whole thing together, it'll be a lot easier to paint and have a nice uniform coat over him. So it looks good, and you can see the details really, really good, really popping up well. So I'm going to do a base coat of this black. Nice even coat. And that Vallejo black paint is really good. Goes straight into the airbrush, no mixing, no thinning. It goes on great. Now to give it a light coat of this dark flesh tone. Now what I do to help the paint mix up is I've got these ball bearings. They're 5mm ball bearings that I got off eBay, and I just pop the top off and throw in one ball, and it works as a great shaker. It does a great job. Make sure you always put the lid back on. Then straight into the airbrush again, and an even coat over it. Now it's not a completely solid coat. Some of the recess areas will come up darker. Now I'm going to give it another coat of this barbarian flesh. And mainly concentrating on the raised areas. And the old hairdryer to speed up the drying process. I'm really liking the colours that are coming up here. Now I'm going to use this dark oak flesh contrast paint and give it a quick wash over it, but as soon as I put it on, I've realised that it's just way too thick. It's the first time I've ever used this stuff, because I've seen a few videos and it looked like it was pretty good stuff to use, so I gave it a go, and yeah, too thick, so I decided to have a think about it, a bit of a ponder. I realised probably the best way to do is just to thin it out with water and give it a nice coat. And it's going on much better. It's going in all the recessed areas. Really, really happy with the way that's covering now. And I'm liking how uneven it is as well. It just feels a bit more natural. And Gary's just starting to take shape now, and his colour palette's looking good. And during the process of this whole build, I kind of decided I was going to stick to a limited colour palette, specifically a whole bunch of browns, earth tones. I'm just making sure it gets into all the recessed areas, a nice coverage. I'm really liking the way it's coming along now, looking really good. Now I'm going to use a mix of this pale flesh and flesh, and straight into the airbrush once I mix the two together. 50-50 mix. And in this particular case, I'm going to concentrate on the raised areas once again. This kind of starts unifying everything together. Don't forget, if you want to support this channel, hit the subscribe button and like and share. Now, a combination of this Alexan lichen, hexed lichen, and a red terracotta. And I'm going to use that in the shadow areas, the recessed areas. Now, though that hexed lichen looks black, it's actually a purpley colour. And just getting it to the right shade that I'm after. And then into the airbrush and start spraying. And you can see the purple recessed areas are really looking good. They're looking very ogreish. I'm still new to airbrushing, so yeah, I need a bit more practice, but I'm getting there. And back to the Barbarian Flash here, and give it a complete light spray just to unify everything once again and soften some of the areas that I kind of overdid a bit. He's really coming along nicely. So now I'm going to actually do some of the highlights on his face, and using the combination of this Barbarian Flesh and also Flesh, and I'm going to mix it there in my little painting palette thingy, and some of the raised area around the eyes, the ears, that type of area on top of his nose, just to give it some highlights and really add a bit of depth to his face. Gary's really coming along really well. Really happy with the way this is coming along. I've never actually built an Ogre before in my life. I don't really do fantasy. I specifically stick to science fiction. So it's a bit of fun here. Something a little bit different. And I kind of picked a quite large Ogre to do as well. And I'm doing, highlighting the top of the chin, around the cheekbones. And of course, those bits need to be done as well. They're very important. And highlighting some of the veins. In retrospect, I probably should have done them in the purpley paint as well. I kind of just did that. Going back to the hex lichen, I'm adding that to the original mix there. I'm going to paint right at the tip of his nose, just to give it a bit of a veiny, purpley nose when they get really cold. And now the lips. Also underneath the ears, some of the recessed areas. Again, just to add a bit more contrast and depth between the high areas and the low areas. Now for this white grey, and I'm going to use this for the eyes as well as the teeth. I don't use plain white simply because it's too stark, so it needs to be a bit more greyish off-white. Now for the eyes, I'm using this transparent red. Straight in the middle, make sure they're nice and even, which is always a challenge. And then onto the transparent yellow, and I'm using that for the teeth, just to give it that gnarly finish to it. Nice light coat of it, which has been watered down a bit. Then back to the white, or the white grey, and just touching up the edge of the teeth, right the tips of it. You can see his face is looking really good. I'm really happy with the way this is coming along. Onto the German red brown. Now it's time to do the fur skirt. Probably wouldn't want to say that to his face. Nice even coat over it. That rope as well, and combination of the German red and the flesh. Now I'm using this color just to highlight areas right at the top of his skirt. Comment in the post if you think of a better name for that. So you can see the difference in tone. I really like the separation there. And all it is just to add a bit of interest. I'm using this NATO brown for the leather areas and also the rope. Contrasts are looking great. I didn't actually water it down this time and it went on too thick, and I kind of lost the separation between those two base colors that I did earlier, and yeah, that kind of disappointed me a bit. So I jumped onto the burnt flesh. I'm using the burnt flesh to actually dry brush those raised areas. It's looking good. You can see it's looking good, but I'm kind of disappointed that I lost the two different tones there. And then a combination of the NATO brown and the flat white, and those two I'm going to use for the leather areas. Now for the rope, I kind of decided I might go with the gold leaf here from Tamiya. And slightly get away from all the browns, even though it's a kind of earth color, I guess. And I'm really happy I made this decision because it really looks good. Really happy with it. Make him into a kind of a royal ogre. Could be a king, Gary the King. So it's time to put him onto a base. This is a base I bought from Bunnings. It's a local hardware store, and I've already drilled the holes off camera. And I've given it a couple coats of satin gloss, satin finish. And what I'm going to use to actually create the terrain is just some soil here I found outside in my garden. And also some kitty litter. I'm just using PVA glue here, and I'm just going to brush that evenly over the base there. It's nice and thick, so it should stick the kitty litter quite easily to the base. And a nice little sprinkle. And a pat to make sure it sticks down nicely. Let's bring in some of this garden soil. You've got to add this type of thing just to add a bit of variety to the base. You can't have it all nice and even. Fortunately, kitty litter is very even, all the little pebbles. Quick spray of isopropyl. And then a watered down solution of the PVA glue. And I'm just dabbing it all over the base there. So it all sticks to varying sizes together. Now I've stuck Gary back onto the base and pressed him in so he created a bit of an indent where his actually feet are. So it looks slightly more natural. And you can see it's looking really good with all the varying sizes. Now I left that overnight to dry. I'm just using this watercolor, the raw umber, and a really heavily watered down version of it. And turning it into a wash. I'm just going to cover the whole base with it. That'll be my base color. Now just to add a bit more contrast, I'm using the burnt umber and also watered that down heavily. And I'm just going to randomly splash it around the base. Pull out the old hairdryer once again to speed up the process. And a combination of the NATO brown again and the flat white. And I'm going to use that mix to actually dry brush the surface. This really starts bringing out the base to life. And some of the higher ridges, or the higher pebbles, I'm just using the flesh color there, the flat flesh from Tamiya. And time to stick Gary down, so I'm using this 5-minute Araldite. It's a 2-part epoxy glue. Just smother his feet with it. And throw him into place. Even though it's 5 minutes, I kind of left it for a couple of hours to dry to make sure it's really solid. Now I've got these little tree roots that I actually foraged for years and years ago, a good 25, almost 30 years ago, and they've been sitting in a box for all those years. And I'm kind of using them, placing them around the area just to get an idea of how they're going to look. And once I'm happy with them, I trim them into place. And I really like how realistic they look. I'm just using PVA here just to glue them into place. That stuff dries transparent, so it looks really good and kind of disappears. Don't really see it. And just some more roots. And they look great. The scale looks really, really good and suits. And I can use little broken off bits as branches on there as well. And really happy with the way this is turning up. It's coming up great. Really, really good. Really happy with it. Love the tones of it. There he is. How good is he? Well, I think it's time for the hero shot, and we can have a good look at the finished product.